Finalment el professor Tarasti ha arribat, disculpes pel retard. El professor Tarasti es pot presentar de 3 o 4 maneres diferents. Us presentaré de la meva manera. Jo el vaig conèixer el 2006 a Roma i des de llavors ha estat sempre una persona molt cordial, molt amable. Ho he vist a fer amb molta gent després, per tant deu ser la seva manera de ser i no només amb mi. Una persona molt assequible i sense cap dubte el número 1 de la semiòtica musical i una persona realment sàvia. Per una banda, l'escola de la semiòtica francesa, Lévi-Strauss, etc., és la seva font, el seu recorregut per arribar a la seva semiòtica musical. Això va ser la seva primera fase. A la fase actual estem en un altre moment en què ell ha desenvolupat la seva pròpia teoria, que és la semiòtica existencial. En la seva presentació ell parlarà de l'una i de l'altra i per tant és una ocasió única per conèixer l'obra d'un pensador realment original i molt important per al pensament musical en general. Estic content que sigueu aquí. And many thanks in advance, Professor Tarasti.
Well, yes, can you hear me? Good morning. Okay, fine. So, I thank very warmly Juan for this invitation, for this occasion. And in fact, I think this is the second time I'm attending these meetings of young musicologists of Spain and Portugal. So it's was first time invited by Ruben Cano, who is here, but now we are back again. And Barcelona certainly is a famous music town, and I can only congratulate you that you are studying in this famous music academy of Barcelona. Yes, in fact, I think, Juan, you already gave the structure of my speech, because I was thinking that we don't have much time thinking on what all should be said, but I was thinking that because all my books exist, or I published a lot of books, and I suppose that they are available in your library, so that this would be rather a free introduction to my output and encouragement to continue by further reading. I took with me some 3 books, just what were at my hand, namely this A Theory of Musical Semiotics, which is published at Indiana University Press in 1994, but available also in French, Semiotique Musicale, and in some other languages like Chinese and Farsi and so on. And then Semiotics of Classical Music, which is rather recent, from 2013, I think, by Mouton de Gruyter, Berlin, my publisher. Subtitle is How Mozart, Brahms and Wagner Talk to Us. So this is my present phase, which one must this existential semiotics, but this is about music. So it's an application of my new epistemological existential theory to music. So that's why it might be just for you interesting. There is another book which is purely theoretical, entitled Sein und Schein. It is in English, although the title is in German. It was my publisher got the idea. So Sein und Schein, it means being and appearance. Explorations in existential semiotics, and it may be also here. But if you are interested in this issue, you might read the first book, this yellow one, which appeared 2000 at also Indiana University Press, Existential Semiotics. So this might be a kind of introduction in general to this quite new theory. But I try to explain you very shortly, because after all it is not so difficult and hard. Anyway, I just gathered some of my ideas. Yes, well, I suppose, so you are essentially from Music Academy. So this means that you are not what we call university students or scholars. So there is a difference, because if you are musicians, it's fine. You get into music itself. You see music from inside. But on the other hand, in musicology, you must have also studies in humanities, philosophy, linguistics, anthropology, and so that's another aspect. And so I feel there should be this combination of these two facts. But first, I must tell a little bit about myself. I must be that much egoist. Well, I'm from Finland, so I'm from Helsinki. You may know where is Helsinki. It's very far away. We are just in the other corner of the Europe. And, but in Helsinki, it was possible to get a totally classical education. So I was in Normal Lyceum, and I studied Latin 8 years, 5 hours per week, and Greek 3 years, rather much also. And then, of course, other languages. So that is my basis. But in my late school years, I got interested in German philosophy. And in German language, and I translated as a quite young student into Finnish such difficult books like Heidegger's Sein und Zeit halfway, and then Hegel's Wissenschaft der Logik, Science of Logics. But then I stopped because no one showed any interest whatsoever in my efforts. It was because Finland is rather famous in philosophy, but our philosophy is Anglo-analytic philosophy. Anglo-analytic school, which is dominant still, in which we have brilliant scholars like Jori Hendrik von Wright, follower of Ludwig Wittgenstein in Cambridge, and so. So philosophy was Anglo-analytic, and I was quite upset when I entered university that philosophy was not Kant, Hegel, Schelling, etc., but it was Anglo-analytic. Now, anyway, I had also the music studies, so I entered University of Helsinki in theoretical philosophy, but at the same time at Sibelius Academy, which is our equivalent to you. So piano was my major, and studied these both simultaneously. But then I had in the university was theoretical philosophy, and academy was piano. But then I was in the army 1 year in the service, and then I got a social awakening, and I interested in sociology and anthropology and ethnology. That was such a year, it's for you almost archaeological, 68, so anyway, and that was, the year in whole Europe, crazy year. Okay, I got interested in such issues. And then I took sociology, and then ultimately I got a book by Claude Lévi-Strauss, whom you may have heard about, who is who was great French academician and anthropologist, and who had studied South American Indian mythology in his, among others, in his voluminous 4 books on mythologique, which was study of the whole. So I got in Lévi-Strauss. He was my great idol of my young years, and still is. He passed away recently in the age of 102 years. So it is worthwhile to study semiotics if you get into that. Anyway, Lévi-Strauss was founder of structuralism, such an intellectual movement dominant in many issues. And of course, Paris was a kind of center. I went to Paris to study with Lévi-Strauss. It was possible. He gave lectures at Collège de France. But I also met all these other, Roland Barthes. I interviewed him twice, and Greimas, of course, who became my supervisor, Lithuanian, French great scholar and founder of the Paris School, and Tsvetan Todorov, Michel Foucault, and these others. So I was in that circle, so to say. But if we think of these, let's say, great semioticians, rather few of them have said anything about music. It's surprising if you go to the library and Umberto Eco, almost nothing. Something, but it is something like, I think in La Struttura Center, he says that music has denotation but not connotation. It means that if I play here, it denotes C. That's all he says about music, so it's not very much. He's very musical. I have heard him singing in his castle Montecerignone, but it's another story. Now then, Greimas never anything. Yuri Lotman who is a great Estonian scholar in cultural semantics, nothing about music. Michel Foucault, nothing. Julia Kristeva, nothing. The only persons are called Levi-Strauss, who wrote much about music, and Roland Barthes. Roland Barthes, who became, they say in French, bien médiatisé, so he was discovered by Americans as one of those Parisian geniuses which they invent all the time, and he was translated into American and became famous, and especially singers apply his theory on the le grain de la voix, the grain of the voice, okay. He also wrote about Robert Schumann, nice essays. Okay, but only this, and Levi-Strauss was very interested, and music was him the primary sign system of the whole culture. He was greatly inspired, and he had the idea that human mind has 4 activities. They are all stemming from language. You know, that was the primary issue in structuralism, that language was the key to everything. I mean the verbal language. So that linguistics gave the methodology how to study all culture, also music. This explains why later in this musical semiotics, almost all analyses were strongly dominated by linguistics and linguistic methods, which they tried to apply to music. Anyway, Levi-Strauss had the idea that language, like Saussure has taught, has 2 aspects, namely le son et le sens, the sound and sense, signifiant, signifier. And then by the time history of mankind, 2 activities developed from, one was poetry, which took only the sound of language, but, which, wait a minute. Yes, excuse me. One was myth and one was music. Myth was language which took only the sense, but omitted the sound. Well, if I take any myth, I can tell it in whatsoever language, like Oedipus myth. I can tell it you can tell it in Spanish, English, whatsoever. So sound is not important, only the story and the structure. Then music, contrarily, adopted sound but not sense. So music had only pure sound but without any sense. So Levi-Strauss's whole issue to musical meaning is that it is formalist. Music does not have any sense. It's only sound. Now that is old-fashioned theory by Edward Hanslick, Turner's Bewegte Formen, you know, and by Igor Stravinsky in his Poetics, that music does not express anything, it's only sound phenomenon. It's amazing that Levi-Strauss has this opinion, but that is the truth. Well, I said poetry, because poetry is a special case in which, of course, the sound of language is very important. Poetry is untranslatable principle. We can't, because it's bound strictly with message with phonetic aspect of. And so the 4th activity, according to Levi-Strauss, was mathematics, which did not have neither sound nor sense. It was purely abstract, so his mind. So he had this nice scheme. So Levi-Strauss said that la musique, c'est le langage moins le sens. Music is language without sense. But because we feel that music is like deficient language, when we go to concert, we automatically bring there our own associations. And so music gets meaning by this associative mechanism. Now anyway, I would say that by the time from semiotics, which of course, semiotics is a big issue, starting from antiquities, Plato, Aristotle, and then Middle Ages. And structuralism was just a phase in 1960s, 70s. And structuralism passed into post-structuralism and postmodernism, so it was like that. But semiotics is the broad issue, and now what is musical semiotics? I would say we can approach it either from via musicology, and in even most traditional musicology, they admit that musical semiotics is a discipline nowadays. So it has been admitted, it's accepted its existence. To study the musical meanings and how music as a meaningful issue. Something like musical signification, as Juan mentioned yesterday. So that's one source, but the other source is, of course, music. when we go along the musical history, we see how the meanings emerge from the musical practices by themselves. Now, I don't defend the American so-called grounded theory, which means that there is no theory at all, there are only facts. That's never true. There are facts millions, and they don't tell you anything unless you have a theory, certain conceptual concepts into which you put your observations. That's something I think. But anyway, that is evidently one of the sources are just musical practices. And so we can just have a glimpse on the some quite obvious. In Baroque style, even the most abstract phenomena of absolute music, instrumental music, like Bach, for instance, you see. So the C sharp minor fugue, very abstract, 5-part fugue, but it is it's a cross, it is Christ. It had a theological meaning to the Baroque people. Okay. Then some other refer to the other like vocal practices. G minor, so that is ribattuta vocal techniques, this trill. So it's he brings to the instrumental music something from vocal music. Guido Adler, founder of musicology, said that there are fugue themes are either vocal or instrumental. Typically vocal to be sung was just this. Typically instrumental will be B major. You don't sing it. It's just decorative, figurative. It's just made to be played. So in Baroque style, and then of course in Baroque we have a lot in Handel also. I have here some examples I can play this whole book to you, but let's say G minor prelude to Handel. Stewart, it's the French ouverture, it's dotted rhythm stemming from France. So, you know, Baroque had the national styles already, so French, Italian, German. So anyway, and then the affectenlehre. But then we come to Viennese classicism, of course, the famous topics theory, which is now so fashionable in musical seminars. Topics, you know what are topics? Topics are just recurrent style features in music, in symphony, concerto, sonata, which are stemming from the social practices of a certain time. So there were the American Leonard C. Ratner published his book, and many others, Raymond Monell, Robert Hatton, and others have studied the topics theory, which is very fashionable. So typical topics were, for instance, hunting calls. Hunting was very popular in the European forest in the 18th century. And always when you hear this, it is horn. It's horn signal, refers to hunting. So when, for instance, even when Beethoven writes, it's hunting call, but now it's romantic. It's les adieux, goodbye. So it has a certain romantic addition. And so many people like even still we have Strauss in Rosenkavalier. I have it here somewhere. In Rosenkavalier we have so we have this the same person of the 18th century music. So hunting, well then Empfindsamkeit, you know, early romanticism, Sturm und Drang was yesterday, or storm and stress in English. So something which is dramatic, stemming from also from literature, Goethe and Schiller, Goethe's Werther, Schiller the Räuber. So for instance, what could be typical Sturm und Drang? Well, it's everywhere. Fantasy, but that is dance, but it's dance, less dance. There's no special dance with the pairs. But then if you have this, like that, in the 7th, it is Sturm und Drang. Galant style, Rococo style, gracious ornamentation, Baroque style, gewundene Stil. So these are topics, and people knew these topics in Mozart's and Haydn's time, and they knew how they brought the meaning to music. Maybe we have lost this sense, but now it's getting back thanks to musicology. One example in my book is this Mozart C minor fantasy, in which Mozart puts these topics one after the other, and they make a narrative. So they make a logical, coherent, this. There is this arpeggio, Sturmtrang, and then Sturmtrang. French overture. Rhythm. Then in Finzanker. This is very expressive, and then Doppelschlag, Galant style. So they are one after the other, and so music is full detail. Now anyway, after Romanticism, after classical style comes Romanticism, and of course we have the literature is central, literary programs, so-called hermeneutics in this sense. In my fresh book, I have studied on Robert Schumann fantasy, the C major fantasy, which is very literary and very typically romantic. It's like a huge symphony for piano, and it has a motto from Friedrich Schlegel. So, this it is. There is a motto, this beautiful poem, this durch alle Töne in bunten Erden Raum, ein leiser Ton gezogen, für den der heimlich lauschet. So it's very, very, very cryptic, mystic, and people have thought, what is this silent tone which is sounding through in the dream of the earth? And some say it is Clara Schumann. It is evoked by the descending fifth, a day later. That would be Clara Wieck, so it is a musical sign to his part. Well, that's one theory only. Anyway, I have a full study of this piece, one of the first with existential semiotics, and you may read by my theories. So Romanticism is certainly, and then we come to Richard Wagner. It is very, very rich indeed. But so I mean that is one source in music history. But now let us go now to these three theoretical phases. So my first phase was this Levi-Straussian, and I published the book Myth and Music, which I suppose you must have here in the library. Myth and Music. It's early '79 appearing by Mouton de Gruyter. I studied namely three great musical pieces with a similar type of heroic story, and they were Wagner's Siegfried, Sibelius' Kullervo, Sibelius' first symphony based on Kalevala, and Stravinsky Cocteau's Oedipus Rex. So that was the idea. But I applied the Grimalt's so-called scene analysis to the aesthetics of myth in music. And I discovered a network of mythical aesthetics which covered the whole European musical history. So such scene is the ultimate unit of meaning, scene. So like nature mythical, hero mythical, magical, primitivist, religious, sacred, and so there were altogether, I think, 14 such ultimate units whose combinations made just full musical texts. So that was my first effort. But then my second phase is my Parisian phase, from which is stemming this book, A Theory of Musical Semiotics. Now this was based. Now I should have something to draw you. Make my. This was based on Alvidas Julian Greimas, who was, as I told you, had immigrated from Lithuania after the war and he was a philolog of French philology and came to Paris, École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales, and founded a school. School which became one of the most systematic and sophisticated schools in semiotics. And even nowadays, Grimalt passed away a long time ago, most Italian semiotics is Grimaltian, and most South American, Latin American is, maybe in Spain as well, I don't know, and Portugal in these countries, and also in the Eastern European countries. So it was very strong, and he was my teacher, so I knew him very well and very close. I have on video his lectures, but we have no time to listen to that. Anyway, Grimalt, I should be able to because this is my old theory, I don't have this in my PowerPoint, but except, wait a minute. No, it is not here, but never mind. He had the idea of generative course. You may have heard about generative models by the American linguist Noam Chomsky. You know, he had the idea that language has a certain tree structure, like this. You know, you study structure. I think that is taught at schools, how you analyze grammar. And this was adapted to music. They saw that also music has a generative course, like Chomsky's grammars. For instance, when Chomsky studied this famous phrase, John beats his sister, so that John is a noun, it's subordinating the beats, and beats is subordinating the object sister, and sister where he is. So you get a hierarchy. So when you say the phrase, you put one sign after the other. So in language, there is a syntagmatic aspect, linear. I put signs, words, one after the other. It's a chain. The same is in music. We put tones, one after the other. It's a good analogy. But in language, these units are not on the same level. They have a hierarchy. They have different weights and values. The same in music. Let's say in music, if we put chords, some very primitive musical statement. You have different chords of different degrees, and so they are different value. One is tonic, one is dominant, subdominant. So there is a grammar behind music, obviously. No, that was very tempting, and now Grimalt put his whole semiotics system, which is very broad, into parcours génératif, and I applied that freely to music. But I was not quite orthodox Grimaltian, so because I'm also a musician and a musicologist, I changed it when the facts needed it. So I'm not like Hegel, who said that if the facts don't fit with theory, it's bad for the facts, so my theory is the right one. So I'm not like that, so for me the ultimate reality is musical one. And so I got 4 most important levels of which generate musical meanings. Deepest one is called isotopy. Isotopy. Isotopy in English, it should be, by the way, isotopicity, the quality of having isotopes. And it is coming, of course, from nuclear physics. We have the isotope. But isotopy here is the level of meaning which it's a hidden factor. It's not empirical. It is there, and without it, you cannot understand a phrase. Now, Grimalt studied, for instance, some literature. Had one study on Maupassant's short story, Deux Amis. It starts with very short phrases. It takes place in Paris 1871 when Germans are surrounding it, they're attacking, the Prussian war. And then Deux Amis, they go to fish and they are then shot by a German officer. Anyway, it starts that Paris was under siege, there was nothing to be eaten, there were many rats on the street, so short phrases. But you read it as one whole because it's all about Paris. So Paris is the isotopy there. Well, in music, I think it's quite logical. In music, you hear musical events, not fragmentary, but united by certain isotopy. Let's say, many examples. Let's say Beethoven. Again, here are short events, but they are bound by one isotope, which is the tonal isotopy. Moment towards this chord is then it's also there. Or let's say something else, like I often use César Franck prelude chorale thing, you know this. Events and pauses, but there is only one phrase, so there are itopies. Now then, these itopies, they can be also superimposed. They might be so-called complex itopies, so you have two at the same time. For instance, in Wagner, you know, in Valkyrie, this motif, so-called death motif. It's very gloomy, very, very gloomy. Why it is gloomy? Because we have two chords like D minor, which goes to dominant seventh of F sharp major. So you combine these two chords which are very far away and you put them in the same phrase. That's why it is very strange. We have very strange feeling now. It's death motif. Or in Mussorgsky, you know this so-called. Boris's coronation tremble. You have fourth, D major, 7, A flat, so that F sharp becomes enharmonically G flat. The same effect. Complex itopi. Rhythmically, you know this. Bach part of that G major. Two rhythms, either twice 3 or 3 times 2. That's why it's so lively, because they are so. Music much operates with itopies in that sense. So that's the deepest level. Then we have the 3 categories in the process of discursivization, but finally musical message is aiming for surface level music as heard. Then we have 3 categories of time, space, and actors. Temporalité, spatialité, actualité in French. So temporality, spatiality, and so on. I think it's intuitively quite logical. Music has space. I think so. It has been much studied by cognitive psychologists what is music has space, but it's quite obvious. At least we have the so-called outer space, which means that either you have high or low register. For instance, in Beethoven, something happens here, very low, and then lead, very high. There's just so space. But I think there's also inner space, which means just in tonal music, the tonic dominant tension. For instance, in Wagstein, you see the bass line. Bass line goes like this, and in opposite is Passacaglia, so it's taken from Baroque music. So you see, topic is there. So time, quite obvious. Music moves in time. It's the temporality, and much of musical aesthetics is playing with just the time aspect. So I don't need to go deeper to that. And then what is this actoriality? Now, actors are those figures in the discourse which are more or less anthropomorphic. In music, they are like themes or melodies which you recognize. They represent human personality and human beings. So they are just the actoriality, and very much of music is using these actors in. We might say that the whole process of thematic nature, thematicity is just of that. Yes. But I think of space, I would say that whole Heinrich Schenker method is very much based on musical time, because if you have the Schenker is based on the idea that you have a triad, and either you have focusing, fokussieren, it's auditive, you have Ausfaltung. So this is unfolding in English, unfolding. So the space is either dense, packed in one chord, or then it is broader. So, and then comes something very important. Fourth level, when you go down, are the modalities. And that was perhaps the most important innovation of Grimalt to semiotics. No, modalities, well, you are musicians. Of course, modalities, they are church tones, Dorian, Phrygian, Titalian. But now here they mean something different. Modalities are the ways whereby a speaker animates his or her speech by her wishes or hopes or certainties. And in certain languages, like your Spanish language, you have so-called subjunctive verb form. If the main phrase has a modality, the subphrase verb must be put to that. It's for you automatic, but not very difficult for us Finns, because we don't have in Finnish language this at all. So let's say in French you say, I hope that he comes. J'espère qu'il vienne. I think Spanish you should say modality probably. Yes. Or I have to go to bank. Il faut que j'aille à la banque. You don't say il faut que je vais à la banque, but you must put this irregular verb j'aille à la banque. That is modality. And modalities, Grimalt distinguishes two fundamental, to be and to do. Being lettre, doing faire. Being is that you are there, it is static, and doing is something active. And then there are 5 modalities, namely will, can, know, must, and believe. So, vouloir, pouvoir, savoir, devoir, and croire. So, modalities express what you have in your mind, and I would say that when we bring this to music, it's quite essential because we enter to musical semantics without any programs, literary programs or concrete meanings like Beethoven, Pastoral Symphony, Cuckoo. No, they are purely human modalities. Yesterday I heard this wonderful presentation of Commedia dell'arte and Noted Haydn. I think that was the actor in the side of the pianist was just expressing the modalities, modal contents, what you will, want, can. It was honestly wonderful presentation because, of course, essential are not the gestures by themselves, but what the gestures express and convey and manifest. And that is just the modalities. So, I mean, this is this was great innovation by Grimalt. And then we have the 4th phase, it is, of course, the oops, time is running. 4th phase is, of course, the surface, namely the themes and themes of music, but well, in my book I had some complete studies. One is about some Chopin studies, but there are many others also. But Chopin, Polonaise Fantasy was my first narrative study, and then the second one was Chopin G minor Ballade, which is perhaps the most formalized, the most complete, in which I had the modal grammar of whole ballad, so all the modalities brought to the music. Music being is tonic, stable, harmony. Doing is dissonant. So, and they are used by many composers, let's say. I have many examples, like, well, I have, for instance, play. I think it's over, yeah, okay, space also. I had, I hope I can find the Bruckner example. No, maybe I can find it so quickly. Because composers use this, oh, here it is, okay. You know the Bruckner 7th Symphony. Then we have being, pure being, but then being is negated, denied, it is here. Then comes doing. There are being the Ninth Symphony is different. 5 D minor, Ninth Symphony. First is das Nichts, nothing. B. Directly, without any, so different narrative program. By the way, this idea that we have 4 cases is something very typical of the Paris school. It is called semiotic square. I should now be able to make some drawing, but that comes also, semiotic square, we have 4 terms, S1, S2, non-S2, and non-S1. It's square, and they are in logical 3 types of logical relations, and it is a general structure of human mind which you can apply on whatsoever text, and it gives a kind of order. Let's say if you face a new composer or new composition whose structure is unknown to you, it's chaotic. You may use semiotic square and you get already something. For instance, in that Chopin study, this Polonaise sentence, you know, it's but these terms are not S1, S2, but they are non-S1 and non-S2 because they are already verfremdet element, alienated. If you take as a normal Polonaise this A major, that will be S1. But here we are in A flat minor and C flat major, so it's strongly darkened. Like Adorno's play, this dystere Abblendung des Klanges is the somber, austere darkness. So they are negative already. And then we are sinking, getting down. And then we go up. And this is, as you remember, written with small notes, without rhythmic values. So it is also negative. It is non-S2. And now you have heard non-S1, we have heard S2 and non-S1. And because you are now waiting, all the composition, when shall I get the S1 and non-S2? So Chopin says them at the end, and that creates tension, narrative tension. It's teleological. You want to have this because you have to have this perfect, nice square, and they can get at the end, you know, this, there's the rhythmic, and then you get both of them. Okay, but I mean that is important, but I think time is running very faithfully. Let's go to the last one, it is the existential, but I'm really sorry that I have no time. This was the Paris school altogether. Well, now I might have a use of this because I have here something. So, for the first, there was one article about my theory by Jan Valsiner, who is rather